it's an interesting transition that we've been going through in the last maybe 2-3 decades, and I've been in the IT industry now. This is my 30th year. So being here for so many years, we've seen the transition that's happening in front of us. So at a time when I entered, we probably were reporting to a baby boomer generation whose thought process was a lot about loyalty, right? So I don't know how many of you would have maybe grandparents who have worked for, let's say, HAL or TVS, right? So the reference would be, oh yeah, call TVS Srinivasan. Oh no, get GIC Narasimhan. So the reference would be with the name of the company. And the successive generations also found a loyalty factor. Yeah, I work for India Cements. Yeah, I also work for India Cements. I got a job there. So that was the predominant factor, I would believe, in our previous generation, was loyalty. In our generation, I'm a Gen X. So for us, the primary factor was how do we bring some stability? Because we saw too many things change in front of us, and the entire concept of a government job versus a private job, the questions started coming up in our generation. So for us, like Sid started, was the advice of my father the right thing? Because my father was in courts for 37 years. He joined as a peon and retired as a gazetted officer. Right? So is that the right advice? Is that what I'm heading for? Is that my future? Or with the changing environment, shifting sands, the rug is being pulled from under my feet, how do I jump before it gets pulled? So my considerations were different. So I wanted more stability. And that's what our generation saw, because the 90s and the early 2000s and even now is that change. So for us to vibe well with baby boomers generation, there needed to be a good understanding of each other and get to the point where we became managers and we started managing the millennials. Now the millennials were born in the internet era, or at least at their growth ages, they are in the internet era. For me, I saw the internet happen in front of me. Would you believe if I say that one IP VSNL connection was 30,000 rupees in 1995 per month? 30,000 rupees. How many of you would believe that I waited for 4.5 years for a telephone line at my place? Landline telephone line. You don't wait for 4.5 minutes to get a SIM card now, right? 4.5 years. So that transition happened, and the millennials, they loved challenges. They loved to go and challenge, establish equilibrium, challenge boundaries. Now we were hesitant. As a generation, I was hesitant to challenge certain established conventions. But the next generation started to challenge. They liked to be challenged, and they hence challenged as well, in equal measure. So what was loyalty and compliance with my past generation transitioned into questioning everything. Now, questioning everything does not necessarily mean insolence or insubordination. It means they want to understand. It means they want to identify with what's happening. So that mindset change I had to bring in myself. And now with you people, the Gen Z, should I call you? Most of you would be the Generation Z. I think your life is going to be all about adventure. Your life is all about adventure. You're going and figuring out new things for us to flourish as an economy, as a society, as a country. So look at how loyalty to stability to challenges to adventure, we have shifted completely from one end of the spectrum to the other. From blind subordination and compliance to adventurous pursuit of things. That's the transition that we are going through. So as long as we are able to internalize this, we definitely can handle people relationships better. So this is my view.
There's a misconception amongst Generation X and few baby boomers at times, not all the time, that just merely by virtue of the number of years of experience that they have put in, they have more knowledge, right? But that's not always right. It's all situational, it's environmental. So the Generation Y and the Generation Z, they have been exposed to a lot more just merely by virtue of the environment, and they may have found faster and better way of doing things. So in spite of all this, what happens is in a work environment, the generation the generation X and the baby boomers tend to get intimidated when the youngsters can find solutions faster and quicker and probably more effective solutions. And they also get intimidated when they don't approach them for help. On the other hand, the youngsters tend to get intimidated by the fact that the baby boomers and the generation X would like to lead them, or they would like to micromanage them. So it's not an easy situation. Is this something to do with understanding each other's psychology better, or how do you analyze this situation?
Okay. Yeah. Further to what Sridhar said, let's understand how this happened. You know, why these different generations and different perspectives and aspirations and motivational factors. Because with the onset of revolution, from say industrial revolution, then we have information revolution, then we have social or digital revolution. So what happened? Even the aspirations, educational and professional aspirations, change. You know, there was a surge in that because of the opportunities that were available from people from smaller villages, and they came out into the cities, and you see the kind of opportunities that have actually opened up. And from thinking about the baby boomers, what kind of opportunities they had no go, right? So they had to actually depend on that job and that company because of less opportunities. Basically, it is more of survival, as Sridhar rightly said, that time for baby boomers, and it is joint families, and they have to feed so many mouths, right? They take care of families. So for them, it was only about work. It was more about survival. Just let's get through this, and they kind of dedicated their entire life into. For now, they have dispensable income, and they have opportunities, and they can take risks because think of the opportunities now. You can start your own business. Startup ecosystem has grown so much, and there's so much support, and there's also investments coming, and there's so much opportunity, so much happening. So the Gen Z and Gen Y is all about quality, and they want to live a good life, and they want fun, and they want everyday challenge, and as you said, adventure. They really want to live life, king size, isn't it? Am I right? Cool. So this is how you change, a change in the aspirations, and I'm sure they all are enjoying having a good time, and they all also pros and cons. As I told you, now they are like left in a big, wide ocean now. Unless they understand what they really want, it's very difficult, because it's like going into a mall and you don't know what you want. Just imagine you'll just be roaming around the mall because you don't know what you want to get, right? So, but if you really know exactly, I want this brand, this color, this thing, it's so easy to go and find something what you want. So it's so important. That's why even emphasis a lot have been also on personal development, understanding themselves, self-actualization, because it's so important to know what you really want and what you want to do in the future.
Great. I think from a headhunter's perspective, Vijay, just adding to what Dr. Sharma just said, the frog coming out of the well and getting onto the ocean now, right? Is it also related to the economy moving towards gig jobs, more freelance jobs coming, project-based jobs coming, and a lot of volatility in the market also, because of which there is heavy attrition and people looking for jobs very frequently compared to maybe 20 years back. Yeah. Is it increase of opportunities, or is it because of the change in dynamics in the market?
First of all, when we talk of baby boomers, then you have Gen X, Y, Z. It was only work, it was like God. Then became life, which is life and work balance. Then became fun, work, life, fun. Then now it is called as futuristic. What is there to be in the future? From that perspective, you see, going forward, the future is towards more of gig jobs. This is one trend that we are seeing across all the industries, and you may have, going forward, you may have one employee working for 3-4 companies. This employee loyalty to one company, this loyalty factor will go away, the stability factor will go away. There were days when if you're an entrepreneur, getting a girl itself will be very difficult. That's the reality. But today,
Good one.
that's a reality. Today, I could see my uncles getting, they said I got married only at 35, 38. I was trying to be an entrepreneur. The same entrepreneurs in the old while were startups. Startup is a word. And a failed entrepreneur today is in hot demand. Failure is seen as success. Failure is seen as an important ingredient in any organization. We've got a couple of instances where promoters are coming and say, hey, I'm looking at hiring a team member. Try and get me a guy from a millennial or a Gen Z who has been a failed entrepreneur. Because he comes up with a lot of, he's now tested, tried, he's burnt his fingers, he knows what to do and what not to do. So going forward, the future is going to be gig jobs, contract to hire. The concept of permanency is becoming very temporary, actually speaking. And you're asking about, is it the number of jobs or is it ambiguity about it? It's a combination of both. Yes, there has been opportunities, but there has always been challenges. You always see companies talking about, I've got positions, I'm not able to get candidates. Always, you have n number of candidates available, still there are a lot more positions getting vacant in the organization because they are not able to get the right skills. And it's a larger skill management, mismanagement or skill development. I don't want to get into that. So the ideal way going forward is going to be gig jobs, and this is going to be ruled by Gen Z. And but this will become an order of day, even going backwards towards the respective Gen X and Gen Y. The reason being, the mature talent is also in demand, and gig jobs doesn't mean it is towards one particular segment or one. It's addressed towards only one particular age group. In fact, I have got CTO organizations asking for CTOs and CFOs to be gig jobs. They come, they offer solutions. There are in the IT industry also. You can see, I would say A, B, C, D is ruling the roost. That is artificial intelligence, big data, cloud, and digital. And on top of it sits the security. So this is how I would like to look into it. If you see in this practice, this dearth of talent available, literally dearth of talent, we could say at least about in the next 3 to 4 years, about 2 to 5 lakh people will be required in terms of digital. And recently, if you see organizations saying about 15 years of experience, people now they're becoming not so relevant to the newer technologies. He has been working for 15 years, he has been found competent. One day he becomes non-performer? No. He has been performing. That's the reason he has been there in the organization for the last 15 years. But he has become technologically obsolete. He has become technically handicapped for the new technology. So as long as you are an old technology, you've been an entrepreneur, you've been an employee, and the future is going to be gig jobs with your newer skills, and you can offer, you can act as an SME for an big organization, and that is welcomed.
Gig jobs actually are very welcome because it gives diverse expertise in terms of self-actualization for an individual, and by the same token, the organizations tend to benefit because of wider perspectives that one can offer.
Talent and newer skills.
Right.
I'm not so sure that those kind of jobs are the right answer or they are the best. And since we're sitting in the college, I can say, what is the difference between a professor who is here in college versus an adjunct professor who is a visiting lecturer? There is a certain degree of involvement with the students. I would say that the non-tangible parameters, like an involvement with the student, participation with them, working after hours and helping them up-level their skills or helping them with an examination question, a person who is time-bound will not do. So in that sense, I believe there are merits and demerits both sides. Now it entirely depends upon the organization as to how do they want to employ the resources and what's the kind of balance that you want between these kind of skills that you need versus the kind of organizational construct that you need. So that's the balance which the organization has to bring. I'm not sure that entirely it will go towards a gig kind of a job. It's just my view.
But the percentage will.
It's a classic Gen X speaking.
Right. Before that, maybe a quick question to the audience. I know it's too early to answer this, but can you imagine hanging on to a single job for, let's say, 10 years at a stretch? No way. Expected.
Be careful. Hang on to one wife or one husband.
Well, it also has to do with, you see, Gen X and Y, they're more into instant gratification and they get bored very fast.
Right,
you know?
right.
So this is one thing which the HR needs to keep in mind, and they really need, challenge, culture, and
Very
something, the jobs which are very aligned to their core, values and core competencies. That's what they're going to enjoy in the future.
Right.
That's correct. And I think I'll give you all of you an example. When we were your age, and I was your age, we used to have one television channel. You like it? You like the idea? No? But no color TV. I had a black and white TV.
You had the TV. You had the TV.
From my 11th standard, I had a TV.
Yeah, you like it.
Before that, it used to be one TV in the street.
Yeah.
So we all used to get together on a Sunday evening in somebody's house to watch the movie together. Right? And that movie, if it happens to be a 1932 movie, which you can't identify with, and a baby boomer or a pre-baby boomer enjoys that movie, your weekend is finished and you've got to wait for the next weekend. How do you like it? Right? So that was, but the point I was making was, whether it was radio or television, there was a 6:30 to 9:30 or a 6:30 to 10:30 kind of a program schedule. And there was a half an hour program for, let's say, children. There was a half an hour program on current affairs. There was a half an hour news. There would have been a half an hour farmers program. And we used to have, there was the most famous incident was either the Chitrahar at 8:05 on a Wednesday evening, where all Hindi songs would be there, or the equivalent in the regional language, which used to be on Friday evening at 7:30. And and the biggest was the World This Week when NDTV started in 1988. World This Week, Upper Menon, 1988, night 9:30, Friday. I would not let anyone get anywhere close to the TV, because I would want to see that. But we were happy with the situation when somebody regulated my time. Somebody regulated what was available to me. And my generation saw the transition in front of us, and you people do not know what it means. Because all the control has shifted from the regulator to you. All the control is with you in your remote. Now, if you choose to see only one channel, you are guilty of limiting your choices. The choices are plenty. And ironically, a 604 channel in Tata Sky is left, which is left of center, which is NDTV, and a 616 is Republic, which is right of center. So you've got the entire spectrum from left of center to right of center. If you choose to see only one, you limit your views. You limit your perspectives. So the choice has shifted from the regulator to the consumer. Now it's up to you how you regulate your time, how you plan your choices, and how you succeed with it. So that is the biggest change that has happened in the last 25 years, in my view. The control has shifted to the person.
Right? So I think the freedom rests with you, as Sridhar has rightly put it. Sridhar, I have another question, especially in the corporate environment. So when we talk of a divide amongst the generations, we are not just talking of a digital divide. Of course, we have the digital divide because the baby boomers probably, many of them who are still struggling to get tech savvy, and there's the generation X that's probably very tech savvy with internet, but still not so social media centric. And now there is the generation Y who are growing up in that era, and of course the Z will have the DNA in them. So it's not just the technical, it's not just the digital divide, it's also the social divide. There are people who, the baby boomers and the generation X, we have all probably witnessed, at least to some extent, a joint family environment. So we are more tuned to living with many people around us. We get more tolerant, we get more empathetic. So the ones that are now growing up are mostly in a nuclear family.
Yes.
So, and with technology overpowering them to this extent, don't you think that they somewhere grow up as individuals and not as the sense of belonging to a community, is that getting compromised?
Okay, my personal belief, most certainly no. Most certainly no. And this is an awakening which has come to me over the years. Okay? If somebody throws that at you, take it with a pinch of salt. Right? I'll tell you why. Why was a joint family or having to learn from people in your close proximity, why was that important at a certain point in time? Because we were so confined to geographic boundaries. We were so confined to the street that we lived in, to the locality that we belonged to. So, for example, if it is Malleshwaram, you know what it means in Bangalore. If it is Rajajinagar, you know what it means in Bangalore. Can you say the same of Whitefield or Electronic City? You cannot. So, the shift has happened from being geographically and physically confined to actually, like I said before, breaking boundaries. Now, technology has enabled you to break boundaries as much as how companies, it's not just humans, companies which were geographically competing against, let's say, who was in Pina, industrial estate, used to compete with people in their close vicinity because they were all sourcing from the same people, they were all selling to the same people, and ultimately they were defined by their geographical boundary. Today, a company here is contesting against a faceless company in Indonesia and another one in probably Vietnam. So, the geographic boundaries, the physical limitations have been removed. So what happens hence is the availability of technology has to bring about this, I would say, bonding. So to your earlier point about baby boomers and Gen X, right? Many of the baby boomers, I do not know how many of you know this, many of the baby boomers, who are all in their late 60s and maybe even early 70s, some of them. Do you know that all of them are now on Facebook and WhatsApp? You know why? You know why? Any answers?
Because they want to stay connected.
Stay connected. That's the easiest answer. Anything else?
More exposure.
More exposure. What else?
wanted to know you what's going on
What's going on? Okay.
because of Gen Z.
Why? Tell me more. Tell me more.
X to be more social.
So what has happened is a lot of Gen X went abroad. And some millennials have also gone abroad. So their grandchildren are there. The biggest duty that most of baby boomers today carry, biggest duty, is to nurture alternately. First the girl's mother and then the guy's mother. They go there alternately 6 months each to the US to take care of the children. From birth till the age of 3, till they are put into some institution. So there is a close bonding that develops there with the child. And to keep that continuity going, in the growing phase, when the child does not forget the face of the grandfather or the grandmother, they have to be available on a video WhatsApp call. It used to be Skype about 10 years back. Today it's a video WhatsApp call. So my mother, who's 87, she uses WhatsApp today to stay connected with her granddaughter who's in Los Angeles. But I was off WhatsApp, just I wanted to detox myself. I was off WhatsApp for 4 months. I didn't think I missed much. And by the way, I still am not on Facebook, I'm not on Instagram. You can't find me. The only social media I'm present in is LinkedIn. But that gives me a lot of professional connects. That's a choice. Again, it's a classic Gen X speaking. So what I'm saying is the opportunity to learn today is expanding with more technology. Now, if you meant, is the familial bonding reducing? Most certainly yes. But is the emotive quotient of the person changing? I think no. It's just that in India, we've traditionally, and you should, at some point in your life, you should read the book called Business Sutra by Devdutt Patnaik. So he brings a lot of mythological concepts and traditional Indian upbringing to today's world. He compares a lot of Hindu religious stories versus the Abrahamic religions as to what is happening. And one of the things that he brings about very, very clearly is that in the past in India, we've always measured people on loyalty, commitment, honesty, hard work, all the intangibles, right? The more you got connected to the world from the mid-90s, the more Western influence started happening, which meant you are looking at spreadsheets and PowerPoints. Everybody is a alphanumeric number in the US, social security number, that's it. Likewise, today you can become some number.
Aadhaar card.
It could be your Aadhaar, right? So what is happening is you are going to be measured only by a spreadsheet that speaks for you and not the emotions that are behind it. So this is where the Indian companies have faced the I would say the dichotomy and the conflict as to how to measure them. So in that sense, that quotient of Indian upbringing is certainly coming down, and a little bit of the westernization in terms of instant gratification or the need to use technology to connect is growing up. But I still think opportunities are good all the same. It just could end up expanding the horizon for people of the next generation. That's what I feel.
The age-based discrimination is very rampant. Today, if you actually see, the sweet spot is 42. If you are beyond 48, people don't prefer you. That's the reality. When it comes to position, there's 50 plus people say, no, I don't want to touch. And there's definitely a discrimination to be there. And many of the entrepreneurs and corporate run organizations, they don't openly say that, but in reality that is what is happening, that's what we have been seeing. And the sweet spot is about 42. And actually the age earlier concept is based on the age, experience. Now that has changed. It's based on your potential, the kind of organization, the kind of the technology or value you bring into the organization, or the kind of potential that you bring into the organization. See, earlier you were using CEOs at the age of 52, 62, and today you can see a 30-year-old becoming a CEO of a large MNC. So that is definitely changed between the boomers to the current age. What we also see is, we see something called as mid-career crisis in our industry. People exactly, if you see, stability is becoming a question. During their young ages, people start, they want to experiment a lot of positions. They switch on a lot of careers. Using, in 2 years, I think, professors about 3 years, in 3 years of experience, having 5 jobs, 5 organizations. And within 10 years, there are people who have seen 10 jobs. So I just wanted to say, as a budding professionals, it is very important that you also have some sense of stability in your organization. When you join an organization, spend at least 2 years to understand what the organization is doing, and try to learn from your peers and your managers. Try to improve your kind of because that is also helps you in testing whether you are understood. At least takes minimum 2 years. In 2 months, even in 2 years, you cannot learn anything. And for that, you are doing MBAs. This 2 years is just a stepping stone into your actual learning starts when you get into your work and not here at the college. It's just preparing you to learn your life, the real professional outside the organization. So stability is becoming very important. And today there are a lot of opportunities, so there is career improvement and salaries are getting high. You take on salaries and you keep on moving. Maybe about some point of time, what happens is there is always a shift towards younger professionals. You hit an age of about 35, 37. Then the demand for a kind of professionals you are constant. You see, today you see all this pink slips which is happening out in the industry is not happening at the below less than 10 years. Actually, it is happening for people who are the age band of about 37 to 45. They are neither able to get into the old system because that's become obsolete. Earlier you had testing, which is becoming, and you had something called mainframes. And that is, I don't think people have heard about mainframes these days. So they are not, those technologies have become obsolete, and new technologies they are unable to get into. And as a result, these are the people who are losing their jobs. At this age group, if you see, they would have got, I'm talking what is realistic. You will have got a car loan, you may have a home loan, your kid may be in your education, and all of it is there. And when a person leaves, is unable to cope up with the new technology, he loses a job at this juncture. Think about it. So stability is one thing. At the same time, sticking to one organization is also not seen as something which is very good. In our industry, you should have a variety of organizations because people see that if you're staying in an organization maybe for 10, 15 years in a career, they see you may not be able to adjust to a new organization, newer culture.
Very true. Very true.
You're in a comfort zone.
You
become the DNA of the organization. That's it. So that is the reason many people, for example, there is also a switch between promoter-run organization
and MNC. In fact, technically in India, all the organizations are promoter and organizations. You follow Reliance or still you report to the promoter at the top. So, but then on a larger phase, if you see a promoter and organization and an MNC,
Many people who come from an MNC kind of a culture and come into a promoter and organization, they fail miserably. And many people who has gone in from a promoter and organization and goes into an MNC at certain levels fail miserably, not all. But this reason being they're unable to accustom to the culture. So try and work with startups. You have an experience in startup. Try to work with an MNC. Try to work with an Indian organization that gives you a variety. And see, at the end of the day, 10 years down the lane, you may be at mid management or you never you can be CEOs in the future. But what defines you, what kind of experiences you have taken. Too many goods is good for nothing. So have a stability, about 3 years in your as a career stability. You start learning, you observe, then you start contributing to the organization. If the growth is good, the organization takes you places. If you feel there is no growth for you, please move on to an organization. But the 1 year step you may have today, there are a lot of jobs available. You may easily get an opportunity, but it's not going to hit you. It will exactly hit you beyond your 35. So prepare yourself.
Actually, I think the 3 years stint is a very moderate expectation, not just from a company perspective, but also from an employee perspective. Because there's a thumb rule that the first year you spend all the time learning things from the company. Second year, you start to give back because of the experience that you have gained. And the third year is the time when you actually can start to
Innovate.
not just grow, but show your value to the organization and put the ball in their court to recognize you and motivate you and value your presence. So I think the 3 years will also give people a sense of gratification, deep fulfillment of having achieved something. It enhances the self-esteem. And then if you are going to look for other opportunities, obviously you are going to prepare yourself to be in the next level. I think that's something that's very valuable that came out of Vijay. We were talking of these divides earlier. We have the cultural divide, we have the sociological divide, we have the digital divide. Besides all of these, there's also a perceived divide, like we-they silos. We are the younger generation, they are the older generation. Now, every individual is different. Irrespective of regardless of the generation, every individual is different and unique. And the multi-generation only adds to the complexity of managing the talent workforce. How in an organization would you actually make sure that you bring about a harmony between people of various generations, they all work together with a shared vision, and yet go back home with a sense of fulfillment, looking forward to your Monday morning. It's not easy, right? How do you make that happen? Just any insights from your experiences?
You said it right, it's never easy. And there could be situations where people of a older generation reports to people of a younger generation, right? So you do face such challenges. Now, but one thing is very, very clear in organizations today, that quantity does not mean quality. Just because you've spent a number of years, it doesn't mean. I myself at one point of time have felt, I left an organization, and 10 years hence I met one of my ex-bosses. And then I realized that that person has stagnated over time, or rather the experience and the exposure that I have had. I worked for American MNCs for 15 years, right? And I did Asia Pacific jobs and all that. So I felt that I have actually gathered a lot more knowledge than my ex-boss. Right? The kind of complexities that I have faced in my life are far higher. But first thing we've got to realize is that as a person, what I try to tell people is, nobody is indispensable. Vishal Sikka had to leave one fine morning from the neighboring company. And till Salil Parekh came, nothing happened. And after Salil Parekh came, also the company is running. Right? Overnight, we've had situations when people had to be sent off, but companies are still running. So the first thing that I try to inculcate in the people is be humble. You or no you, 70 to 80% of the job will happen, depending on the degree of monotonous job actions. Right? whether you like it or not, a good percentage of your job is monotonous, repetitive. You can do that again and again without too much of cerebral involvement. So first thing is that 70-80% will happen whether you're there or not there. It's only about 20-25% where you make a difference as a person with your enthusiasm, knowledge, your engagements, your networking capability, your resourcefulness, all of that, right? So first is, this is a very personal kind of a thing. Second thing that I also try and tell people is empathy. As long as you're able to understand where the other person is coming from, right? That becomes a very, very important criteria in your human engagement. Now, the person might be older than you by age, but it is important to give them the person the space, even though he is your subordinate, he or she is your subordinate. And it could happen the other way. The person may be younger, but that does not give me the right to do brash things, right? That empathy, the understanding, at some point of time, establishing official boundaries and pulling rank is something that you've got to be conscious of. So that's the second point that I would think is important, and it applies to all of you. Tomorrow, one of you might start a company. Like 5 years down the line, one of you might be the CEO or a promoter of a startup, and you might have somebody who's worked 10 years in the industry, like what Vijay just said, and the person might be 5 or 7 years older than. How would you deal with that person? Not saying, look, I'm the boss. At the same time, not willingly succumbing to everything that person do, or not let him hunt you, right? That's the awareness that has to come on both sides. And third and most important thing is, at all points of time, while handling these two people, we've got to be clear that in any argument, there are three views. In any argument, there are three views. Your view, my view, and the correct view. Right? So long as somebody is able to position the correct view, we would be able to handle situations, because you need to handle the issue, not the person. You need to be conscious of that. If this culture the leader is able to bring, then I think the organization can succeed. And where it is not, we've seen enough cases of failure. So that's the one thing we've got to do.
Thank you. Dr. Sharma, from a psychology perspective and a sociology perspective, okay, we now see a lot of youngsters who join the workforce. They are more particular about having their private space, having work from home options, having flexi working options. All these are things that they want and they demand also. Whereas this should be demanded by the older generation, where they have family commitments, they have much more commitments than the younger workforce. But that is not happening, whereas it should have happened ideally. So what do you think is the reason from a psychology and a sociology perspective?
Okay. As we discussed earlier, one of the reasons is the opportunities, as we rightly said, and this generation is more risk-taking, and they don't mind, and another factor is the loyalty factor, which we spoke about. They're loyal to the job, but they're not loyal to the organization as such, right? So, and they want to trade their skills with the highest bidder. Yeah, that's what they want. Yes, they're very practical and they're very analytical, right? And they want to make the best of this life. And unlike baby boomers and Gen X, and we've been a little emotional, and it was in our DNA in a way that which is put by our elders, that we need to be loyal to the company and kind of stick there and be there with them. So we used to take a lot of decisions emotionally maybe, but this generation is they know for sure what they want in terms of the employers, because they kind of research the market as well. So at least if not more, they want whatever the industry standard. So this generation also gets bored faster, and so it is very, and also because of the digital influence, their attention span is very less. Has come down drastically. So to get them onto the job and to get them loyal to the company, so there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and a lot of psychometrics these days where they assess the core competencies and core values, which actually can align with the job, the role that they want to take. So there's a lot of work in terms of HR to understand them individually as well. Again, generalizing them is one thing, and understanding them, if that particular person is fit for that kind of a role. And coming back to your question, the psychologists again, the same thing is like, the opportunities and look at this, see, even if a person quits a job, and there's so many banks offering the, like the personal loan, like I myself, my number is on do not disturb, but still I get so many calls, do you want a personal loan, do you want a business loan? So a lot of them, don't mind living on credit cards because it's easily available. Right, so even they can take that risk, and also because there's dispensable income from the parents' support, and this generation is lucky in a way that parents are also backing them to fulfill their dreams, and they want to do what they really like. So which we didn't have that kind of opportunity because for me, I didn't have that kind of, for example, my personal experience, I didn't have that kind of guidance from my parents, but I had to find my own course, through experience. But they have more educated parents and mentors to to actually tell them, okay, go this route. So make the best of it. So they don't shy away asking the best of facilities and incentives or whatever they deserve. So that's I think that's about this generation.
We works and co-works.
Right.
That's
True,
the reality.
true.
Yeah.
And it's
Also,
like organizations are looking at because the flexible working atmosphere doesn't mean you have to work from home. You don't have to even come to office, but you can be still working from any of these so-called offices.
Correct.
And it has become
Shared
flexible
offices.
offices, flexible living spaces, it's co-working and co-living is done. So the entire concept of working itself has changed over the period of years. And it could be many more changes which could be coming. Your home could become your office. In fact, I remember a joke where in US, if you want to fire, if one organization decided to fire people, so they asked them to come and work in the office. So they didn't want to come to office to work. So it's happening.
Yeah, and another thing that they value is freedom. They want to work, they'll give you results, but they want to do it their own way. So they don't want anybody to impose something on them. So they really value freedom. So that's one of the reasons that the work from home and telecommuting is another thing with the flexible work hours, and that they will negotiate and they'll go for stock option rather than the rewards. So this generation is a bit different, and they're as we said, they are socially influenced, and there's a lot of peer pressure on them to kind of put up a very branded, good look. They're all over on social media, so they have to look good. So their offices have to look good. They have to wear branded stuff, and they really, that's influencing even media in a way. And see, another thing has happened. Through the media, now we know what is happening, in the Ambani household, how the parties look, so what the celebrities are doing, Kim Kardashians, what they're doing, so these things are also influencing them in a way that this is how we're supposed to look, this is how a relationship has to be, and this is how the work has to be, but we don't know the background of it, right? So social media just shows, one side of the coin, so we really don't know what is the background of it.
yeah, I think to a large extent, I think the social media can actually mislead people, not just generation Y and Z, also the generation X. Sometimes we succumb to those kind of pressures and get misled. But one thing that I find, I have had an opportunity to mentor few of the generation Y. One thing that I realize is that the small pleasures of life don't excite them anymore. Is it because they are grown up in an environment that has offered them a lot, or the expectations are justifiably higher because the basics are already taken care of, and their expectations going forward is much at a higher plane? What do you think? And the consequence of that also is they are less resilient to turbulences and hardships compared to some of the generation X's and the baby boomers. So how do you actually analyze that?
Well, I think the environment has kind of made them what they are, because they had educated parents, and parents were really supportive, and lesser children unlike our generation, where parents had to give attention to so many children. Now, the number of children have come down, and they want to send them to the best colleges. They want to give the children the best, so they have that support is there, which earlier generation didn't have. So other than that, what I feel is, if you understand the Maslow's theory of hierarchy, so if your basic needs are taken care, your physiological needs and your psychological needs, next what, so you start thinking higher, and you start thinking about self-realization, actualization. So, but also it gets very confusing to them, because they're not able to understand that emptiness that they feel in their hearts is to do with maybe the other ways to fill that emptiness. So people tend to fill that emptiness with materialistic things. That's what is also happening now. This generation is getting very materialistic. And our consumerization and the media and a lot of things have to play. Everybody's selling so many options. Even when you take clothes or bags or anything, there's so much out there, and they want to go from one brand to another one. There's always that kind of competition because social media, that peer pressure is always there on them. That's another thing. So what is happening is here the basic needs are taken care of, so the psychological needs to an extent are taken care. Next, now they have to get on to the next level of evolution. Even consciously, conscious evolution is also happening. There's another theory of evolution where there is evolution of consciousness happens, from early man to modern man, and then they go on to become a culture hacker, and then go on further from there. That's how even the evolution of consciousness is also happening. So nature also has a role to play in that. So this generation needs guidance more than anything else now, because this feel of this restlessness cannot be filled by materialistic alone, because that also becomes like an addiction. So now there is like shopping addiction, and there is like a lot of porn is an addiction. A lot of things happening these days. They're getting addicted to alcohol, the substance abuse. So this is what they're trying to, kind of bring down this restlessness through a lot of this extrinsic factors. And now that's where psychology and a bit of spiritual views come into play. And because now what happens, the needs get on to more of growth and contribution. So even this generation, if you see, they are also socially inclined. They want to fight injustices, and they want to hack the culture. They don't allow something which is not good for earth, environment happening. You see a lot of them taking part in those things as well. So they're really good. I mean, there's a lot of energy there that has to be channeled in the right way. They really need guidance in there.
Interesting.
I would like to add a point. We are talking about Gen Y, Gen Z, and millennials. I also see there are two types of people in every of those gens. One coming from the metros, and one coming from the non-metros. And if you see, there is plus and minus of both. I would say a millennial or a Gen Z of a non-metro is still is equal to Gen X. That's what we are actually seeing even in the when it comes to the industry as well as family. You see, they are, but I don't say they are conservative, but they are kind of okay and adjusting and kind of yes, we are humble and we are willing to learn. But what we see people from the metro, they get possibly because of all the parents are educated and they get to know more the technology. And there is a lot of difference between the same Gen Zs and Y. There are two kinds of people which we see. And almost said that they have got all these problems, but one of the best companies of these worlds, the red world which we live in, are being created or started by the Gen X and Gen Z. Be it Facebook or Google or WhatsApp or many more newer technology organizations which is coming up, are all promoted by the new technology innovations done by the current Zs, and which actually benefits the entire generation of people is what we see.
Yeah, and if I may add a slightly contrarian point of view to your question. In our time, we believed that we were less material. But actually, given the lesser number of brands and the lesser money at our disposal
Exposure.
and lesser exposure,
Choices.
accomplishing a material purchase was a sense of achievement for us. So getting the first Maruti car was the biggest thing those days. Forget Maruti car. For getting a hero pen for me was a very big thing. It was why? Because it's 30 rupees. I used to write with pens which were 3 rupees. Fountain pens, 3 rupee pens. First it was 1 rupee, it became 3 rupees. Camlin pen was 3 rupees. A hero pen, so-called gold tip, there used to be lots of fancy words floating around. Getting that pen for 30 rupees used to be my first rank gift. Yeah, my dad gave this to me and I used to use it only during exam time, because if you use it during other times it becomes old. Right? So but by the way, it's a material thing. You expected a reward so I think it's human nature to be materially inclined or have a material gratification for what you've done, and I don't think this generation is any different. We easily ascribe that to them. And on the contrary, while we say that a lot of I, me, myself has come in because of the Western influence, it is wanting the right thing for I, me, myself, which has enabled them to rise up against social wrongdoings. Now, which means if their I, me, myself is helping create a social awakening, I don't mind that. Whereas my social thinking of the past, I was confined to my family. I was happy saying, I created a good life for myself. I secured the life of my children and grandchildren. I earned for them for the next 20 years. I can retire peacefully. That was more I, me, myself than this I, me, myself. So I think we tend to use a few things a little loosely to the point that it becomes an indictment against the current generation, which I think it is not.
Yeah, you're right.
I most certainly think it is not. Because these people are as, I would say to your question, they are as excited by a small appreciation for what they have done as I am. They are as excited about getting that reward from their father or their mother for something that they have done as much as I am. They like to have that social recognition, which is why, there's this popular joke, right? And I wanted to follow Facebook in my real life, so I went around walking saying what I had before breakfast this morning, and what did I do, what is my son doing, and there are 3 people following me already, the police, the mental hospital, and whatever, right? So that joke is there, but the social recognition is what they seek from all this, simply because they like that appreciation. So psychologically, they are not very different from our generation. It's just the manifestation is slightly different because of the resources that are available. Right? So if you're able to understand this starting point of theirs, it doesn't matter a Gen X and maybe a Generation Z.
Totally.
And by the way, ma'am, I still say Gen Z, not Gen Z. Because I am still English United Kingdom, not American.
And to add to that, that's rightly said, intrinsically human beings are same, and the psychological needs, emotional needs, spiritual needs, and intrinsically they're all same. But we are all kind of nurtured and conditioned in our own environments, and also because of options that are available. This is like spoiled for choice. That's where they tend to get kind of lost. That's where we need to guide them. That is another thing that's required, at that part. But otherwise, as you rightly say, intrinsically, all human beings are same. We're just trying to understand certain characteristics so that, it'll really help us understand and give them, more, provide them what they really need. Yeah.
But I don't want to forget one point that Shama said though. There is a lot of fancy about weekend parties. You can go and stand on the streets of Indiranagar this evening from 7 o'clock. You know what I'm talking about. That's something that I completely disagree with the current generation on. Right? And people say that IT industry has spoiled it. Take it from a man who has spent 30 years in the IT industry and is a pure teetotaler. And I still do my puja 3 times in a day. So it's not impossible. Most of the battles are won here. So that is a very, very destructive phenomenon that's catching hold of people today. Right? And there are certain things which I believe are okay. For example, baby boomers did not care about any form of exercise because their daily routine, walking, non-availability of metros and buses and taxis and all that, they had to walk a lot. So their lifestyle was different. A Gen X, for me, it was a combination. And over a period of time, I started getting used to sedentary life. So I'm adjusting to some level of walking. For example, I don't climb stairs at all. I don't go through the lift at all. I only climb stairs. It's just that I was brought by the lift here, but I would have preferred to come up the staircase, right? So I find my own rhythm. So it is good for Gen X. Now, if you take any of the millennials, what they love is running. How many of you want to run marathon? Full marathon? Half marathon? Right? This spread will not be there in my generation. Right? So I identify with all that because given the sedentary lifestyles and given the fact that we are not able to do a lot of physical work that was being done in the past, I understand that this is becoming a necessity and I can identify with that. But the rest of it is not something that I can identify with. And if people of this group are able to take this advice, and if you're able to propagate it to 2, 3, 4, 5, 20 people beyond you, I think I would have left India better. So, message for you.
So I think all of you mentioned materialistic pleasures multiple times. So connecting that to the topic that we have in hand about the workforce and reward system, compensation system. What we observe is that there are standard HR policies in any organization which are more connected to levels, designations rather than age. So, what are your opinion? Open to all. Should it not be connected to the age? Because my expectation at my age for a reward would be completely different from what maybe they would expect at their age. Right? Forget the monetary value of that. I may not enjoy going to a resort and partying. I would rather be happy with a gift voucher. So it depends from person to person, and it changes again with age. So don't you think that change is much needed in organizations?
See, I think the entire discussion is based on IT as an industry. There are also other industries, manufacturing, services, retail, pharma, education. And a lot of changes have been happening in these industries. But obviously, IT has been forefront. I see this as actually this change has already happened in the services industry where rewards are getting customized. It's not that standard. It's in fact it's no more age based. Actually speaking, it's no more experience based. It's purely based on performance. In your team, you will have a finance head with about. I've seen organizations where you have a finance person at the top. No, in a project you have a finance. For a project you have a HR. For a project you have a supply chain type, and these will be the various background, varied experience, and various functions. So the concept of the age or experience is already quite broken, at least in services industry per se. In the typical manufacturing construction industry, it will still take longer time to come. So I strongly believe this has actually changed. Though gone are the days that you got a P5 to P20 salary scale, you have to be only in the salary scale, you will not be able to promote you. Those gone. Today there is a lot of exposure you perform. You are not able to get into this project, yes, we move to another project or move to an international location. So, I to answer your question, this is already in place in the industry for at least in certain industries.
I think most of the rewards are linked to, for want of anything else, a grade. And a grade is nothing but a broad approximation of the job role that you perform. So any reward or perk is associated to that job role that you perform. And there is a range of, I would say the reward limit. So once you stay in the job role, you are expected to perform certain activities. And as a result of which you need to benefit from a few things. That is already defined. Now, where it comes to spot awards and discretionary awards, the manager is vested with a lot of discretion. And if not, the manager can put up to the further management beyond the person to be able to apply that discretion in favor of the person. So I think that flexibility is coming. It's in varying degrees in varying industries, though, depending on the size of the manpower as well as the complexities involved. How much of it is knowledge capital versus how much of it is physical material work that they do. And that's the kind of difference that I see, but I think sooner than later it will catch up.
Sure. Dr. Sharma, you want to
Yeah.
answer?
Well, we're already seeing the companies are gearing up to the new workforce that is coming. They want to make the workplaces fun and as Sridhar rightly said, the places look so different. They look vibrant with colors and the flexible working opportunities and everything. So, but what HR could do is keeping in mind of this different generational workforce that they have, they can create like a bucket of these different rewards and opportunities for them. So, according to the ranks, that this can be selected. So at least they can give different choice. Like there is a stock option, then there is cash reward, or there is a holiday. These kind of a thing they can kind of create a bucket. So the employees can choose from. So that can also ease up a lot of this HR engagement team. Can benefit from that. And that's what
I think that's a fantastic point. Selecting, you won the award, now you decide
You
from the
decide.
bucket
to
what
give
you want
them
to become.
options. So that's
It's
what
there.
they like
It's,
to.
it's beginning to
Yeah.
come through.
And Sridhar, this is a question or a suggestion, is what I personally think. The HR as a concept is moving away. It's become a people function.
Yeah.
And it was just a general thinking about it. You see, HR people function is to be done only by the HR team, or is it by the entire people? Isn't this people management? Because at least in the services industry, there is no procurement. The entire procurement is nothing but people. The entire investment is nothing but people. So, how do you, because this is very important because we have people who are out of the industry. So, what I see as a leader, you as a leader, you think that the involvement of leaders or the management, because people function with anybody and everybody is becoming part of people function. So, it is not restricted only to HR team per se to manage this.
True. So, very good point. See, every person has to deal with people and machines today.
Yeah.
Right? So, every person's role inherently involves handling people.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this before, empathy. The empathy and the involvement can come only from the people in the nearest vicinity, which is either the manager or a project leader who need not be your direct manager. You are a part of, like you said, there's a procurement person sitting in the project. He reports to procurement, but he's a part of the project all the same.
Yeah.
And the project manager becomes is sort of a virtual manager, right? So it's only those people who can bring the sensitivity of the situation. What HR function is becoming is it's becoming a sort of a conscience keeper. HR function becomes a sort of a guideline provider. It's like what RBI is to the banks. Every bank has to perform their function, but RBI gives you the guidelines. HR gives you the guidelines stating, I'm going to provide you with this basket of options, like what Dr. Sharma said. These basket of options are available to you to choose from. Now, I apply the discretion every single day, stating, do I want to reward the person for being bold and taking an initiative, or going out of the way and performing a certain role, or being considerate to a fellow employee, or was, I would say, very inclusive in the behavior, whether it is gender inclusive or class inclusive or whatever, whether the person has done it. So I have the discretion in choosing from a bouquet of reasons where I can give the reward to the person too. And so that I think is the job of every manager. So every person has to deal with people, and it is not just managers, by the way. People who are in the team, tomorrow you may become a part of the team. You have to handle your managers, you have to handle your peers, you have to handle your peers' managers as well. Because the feedback from a peers manager is going to be adverse on you. Right?
So what I strongly believe is technical, yes. Technology, your education, your experience, your background, the kind of colleges that you pass out. The most important skill for every successful person, manager, leader, CEO is people management.
Absolutely.
How strong you are in your people skills. How strong you are good at connecting the relations, creating a relationship with your manager, your peer at a 360 degree. That is what is going to take you to a better leader. What I suggest.
Yeah, I think this continuation of what you mentioned, HR as a department is more a facilitator rather,
A catalyst.
rather than calling the shots and
Yeah.
drawing rules and regulations. I think they have to be more of listeners rather than talkers, so that they create the right ambience for people to come and share their concerns or their hardships or the difficulties, and then use that feedback in a very positive way to create a better working environment for the employees. Can we open up for the
questions?
Q&A session?
Hello everyone. I would like to thank Sridhar sir for establishing an equality between generation X and Y. As he rightly said that even given provided with an opportunity, even Gen X would have been same as Gen Y.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also I would like to clear it out like getting jobs those days when it comes to the example of my own mother. She used to say when I passed SSLC, her father had shouted to the entire village saying that there is no difference between Mysore King as well as my daughter because she has passed her SSLC and she has reached a certain level. And passing SSLC was the biggest thing during those times. But now, as you said, there is a peer pressure on the generation that where people have been treated as a work machines now. So there are night shifts, there are morning shifts, which are changing the metabolism rate biological cycle of the people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you think it is a problem of a generation or it is the problem of the organization which is imposing so much of pressure?
You want me to answer that? Okay. At a broader level, it's a problem for developing countries because we've never said no. I realized this in the first phase. I would say in the 90s that we just took on all that we could because we wanted more dollars, we wanted more jobs, we wanted more exposure, we wanted to get even with the world, right? In the mid 2000s, when I was in various MNC companies, I would say no if a call is being sent in the night. I would say no, saying if or we get even. I do one call in my off hours. The next call will be during your off hours. I am not going to be available. And for example, you take any MNC company, talk to your people whom you know. Anybody who is working for an MNC company, today is 14th of December, in 6 days from now, you will have emails from the CEO which says happy holidays. How many of us enjoy holidays during that time? All of us will do backup for some other people who follow Christmas, and we will be the backups for them stating, oh, when somebody is not answering, my backup is so and so. Because we have led ourselves into that position. Now, I maintain the discipline even today. Let me give you 2 or 3 things which you will not find with executives of today like me. Number 1, when I close my laptop on a Friday night, I open only on Monday morning. And I have never worked over the weekends unless there is an absolute grave necessity the sky is going to fall. For the company.
Which never happens.
For the company. That's why I qualified. For the company. Number two, you see everybody fidgeting with their mobile phones. Yes, I did too. When I received some calls which kept on ringing, I found if somebody is in an urgency, I picked up my phone. But otherwise, you still feel people sitting in a meeting. You would find people fidgeting with their phones and looking for an email. I have never used emails on my mobile phone. Never. You will find people saying, oh, you know what, I had to approve. Yeah, I belong to a generation where I did not even have a PC. All of us had a shared PC. One PC for the office where an email was taken as a printout and given to me. I come from that era. I don't believe anything demands that attention that it cannot wait. And if something cannot wait, it means somebody else has faltered in not planning for themselves. So back to your question. The pressure that is coming up is partly because we have created this model of working round the clock. India, Philippines, now even Bangladesh, we have led ourselves into this situation where some part of it I don't think we can get out of. Until the time this tag of developing countries is there, we will need to live with it. Which is why I think the one change that companies are bringing about now is that they shift people across the different shifts. For example, there is a morning 6 to afternoon 2 shift, which is this side. North Asia, Australia, New Zealand. And then there is a day shift, which is closer our time zone. They start at about 9 o'clock or so, 8:30 or 9 or even 9:30, and they go until about 7 o'clock, which is closer to our time zone. And then there is a third shift which starts at 8 in the night or 10 in the night, which goes on till next morning. So the day is broken into 3 shifts of 8 hours each. 6 to 2, 2 to 10, 10 to 6. So people are rotated across shifts. As much as how air hostesses get their time off, right? They get a day and a half off if they spend a full day in air, right? So likewise, that change is coming, which is point number 1. Point number 2, the thing that you made about pressure. I think half of it is work related, half of it is what he said, psychology related. Because people who have not kept themselves current with the technology today, what happens is, let's say, easily identifiable is IT and BPO industry, because those were those were sucking manpower like big time in the last 15-20 years, right? When you begin to work, you are maybe an agent at a call center, or you are probably a coder. 5 years later, and because of the shortage of people, in 3 years you started handling a team of 7 people, and in 15 years in 7 years you were a second level manager handling 7 managers who each handled 15 people. You were running a 100-member organization, so you ended up signing vouchers rather than creating codes. So you're in that place not because you can sign the vouchers. You're there because you bring some value. People lost sight of that value. With the result that when you become 15 years experience, Cognizant and Infosys and the others putting together, 25,000 CVs are in the market now. 25,000.
We've been getting
And they're all not employable again. Right? So part of the pressure that you talked about is how you keep yourself current. And at the beginning, Vijay spoke about ABCD, right? Right? Analytics and
big data,
cloud, digital and security. After 30 years in the industry, I now lead cloud, digital transformation and security business for a company as a vice president. I kept myself current. I don't fear job losses, right? So technology should scare you. The usage of technology should not. So as long as you are able to keep yourself current, a part of the work-related pressure or the peer-related pressure will itself vanish. Because what you study is only useful in the first few years. Nobody cares what I study today. Right? So that is the second part of the challenge. The first part is we have led ourselves into this, but live with it. Rotations are happening. Second part of it is the societal kind of a pressure, because I might lose my job. Third is what you want to do with your career. Because many of us at some point of time begin to feel, where am I headed? So the one thing that you need to remember is when you want to go from here to the other side across a river. All of us would have studied this in physics, right? I want to go to the other IFIM board. But if the river is moving left to right, I begin going from here, I would end up on the other side, because you end up moving. That happens, everybody's career, including mine. I've seen so many changes of my career. I've shifted goalposts or changed directions. Don't fear that. While you do that for sustenance and survival and excellence, don't lose sight of your passion. At my age today, I'm studying doctorate. I have not given up on what my passion is. I have not given up on what my calling is. So as long as you are able to identify what's your calling in life and you don't want to lose sight of it, like what Dr. Kalam says, dream is not what comes in your sleep. Dream is something that does not let you sleep. Keep that burning fire inside you. So if you do these things, 3 things right, rest of the pressure does not matter.
Thank you, sir. Just to add to that, you had a concern of the growing stress levels and also the night shift that people do and the effect that it has on the health, isn't it? Yeah. So to that, I think all that started with the outsourcing. As you said, developing countries took up a lot more projects because they wanted to progress. It was all about money, and dollars. But I think, here the labor laws, the policies can really make a shift here, because when we see that the research is showing some of these jobs like night shifts, are actually affecting the health so much, and
Yes.
it is going to burden the families with such medical expenses, and it's really having such kind of detrimental effects. So why don't the labor laws make such guidelines? We don't need such kind of dollars, isn't it? And also it is in our hands to to say tomorrow, if you get a good salary and it is like affecting your health adversely, it is in your hands, like he rightly said. So to say no to said jobs, I think
The problem is, it is as much at a person level as at a country level. The problem is, if not you, there's somebody else.
Yes,
that's what
As long as that fear is there, you never say no.
and one more thing.
That's the problem.
One more thing, this night shift is something that's not when you have police, nurse, driving. There are so many other industries which has been doing for ages in night shifts.
Very good.
That is the reality.
Very good point.
In reality, if you see, the percentage of people in IT is just about 20%. Rest of 80% of people still do a lot of night shifts. And thanks to the, because of the IT design, I believe
It's more
getting
pronounced.
noticed. it's getting noticed and it's getting addressed. So far, this night concept of night shift was ignored. The people in this industry are really suffering for it.
Thank you all for this wonderful discussion, but I just have a question related to the empathy that we're talking about now. As a teacher, I have a concern. As a teacher, we teach a class of 60. All 60 are not on the same competence level. We have to cater to students who are fast learners, slow learners, and we know how to cater to them and how to. How tolerant or how empathetic is the workplace for them? Now, all of them are going to go into companies, all of them are going to get into jobs. So, my concern is, will there be given time for them to catch up with the rest? Because today I think the entire workforce is all, companies are more about your efficiency and your performance. So there's a lot of pressure on them. There's a lot of pressure on being, the best performer, or there is a benchmark, or the what is it. So there could be many of them who cannot reach that fast. Not that they can't, but it might take them time. So how much of a tolerance level will be there from the company as such? Because I'm not from the corporate, so I really don't know what the picture is the other side.
Let me take that. I'll give you one fundamental difference, right? And this is more in a lighter note. But the fact is, the students here in the school, in the college, they pay to come and sit here. So the teacher is duty bound to take care of all the people and bring a certain level of equality in the education, where the teacher inadvertently spends more time with a student who's below average, because you want to bring him or her up to the same level. This is this life. In corporate life, they are paid to come and sit there. So the manager in the organization has a right to demand a certain level of work from them. So that makes the posture completely different, which is point one. Point number two is, I would rather spend more time with my top performer. You know why? Because he's the most vulnerable person. I might lose him fast because my competitor is also watching him. If I don't take care of him, somebody else will. The same thread that I told her, that if I don't do the job, some other country is going to. Likewise, if I don't take care of that person, somebody else will. So I have to satisfy his appetite. I have to first, like I said earlier, we've got to appreciate them, even for the smallest of things. Give them the right kind of ammunition to work. Recognize them for what they're doing. Give them additional project tasks, which sets them up on a career path whereby I am able to take the person from just an individual contributor to maybe a innovator, if he's more technically inclined, or if he's more managerially inclined or a business inclined, give him a role of a business ownership. I need to build that path along with my team member. And to the earlier question that Vijay asked, building a career is not just HR's job. It's the job of the person with the manager. And I have a role to play with my top performer as well. So I would spend a high amount of time on my top performer for fear that I should not lose him. At the same time, the bottom performers shape up or shape out. It can be as ruthless as that. But it's a little unsympathetic in that sense. Now, where I'm okay with is if a person, despite giving the right amount of, I would say, support and the extent of, leverage on time, if we're able to do that, then if the person doesn't shape up, it's the person's fault. On the other hand, where I disagree with is, you've had 6 levels of interviews to hire a person. Just because the company has not done well because of bad management decisions, to just say one fine morning, I've had enough of you, thank you very much, you take 2 months pay and get out, is not something that I can identify with. So that's where being unsympathetic and ruthless, I draw the line.
Thanks for that honest answer.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. As you rightly said, for companies, it's all about targets and profit. So they're not actually going to look at, they want the best talent in, so there's so many rounds of interviews, assessments, and after that only the candidates comes in. And, I understand, and you seem to be a very empathetic person, and as a teacher, you want your students to excel, and in your eyes, and everybody is same, and you want everybody to do well. So, but what you could do here is you have to understand each individual will have certain weakness and certain strengths. So even those, the students who are not performing well, but they do have certain strengths, very strong in certain areas, right? Be it technical and non-technical. So you need to identify those, and it's always better to work on the strengths, yeah, and kind of train them better on the strengths so that they can take up something which aligns to their strengths, so they have better opportunities in that area. So I think you can play a big role here, and getting them onto the next level.
Sure, I think that's the right way to look at it.
Empathy helps you delve into the situation. Task orientation helps you do what is right for the organization. Because you are paid to do what is right for the organization. Don't forget that. Right? Empathy helps you understand the starting point of the person. Task orientation allows you to take the right decision for the situation. Now, as long as you're able to maintain that balance, there are times, for example, somebody's mother is unwell, admitted into hospital, not able to come to office, was not able to put a leave request in the system, I would be empathetic and I would let it go. Somebody was having a jolly good time in Goa along the beaches and got stuck on the way back, got stuck in torrential rains while driving back and could not make it to office. I apply discretion there and I say, I'm going to demand that day is a leave for you. There's a difference between the two. That's what I'm saying.
But in any spectrum, where should I be more empathetic and where should I not be empathetic?
You mean as a manager or as a person?
As a person.
As a person in your personal life or in your professional life? Professional life. In your professional life, right? So you see, like if you're a manager, for example, you see that if your empathy is going to help that person in the long run. See, as a manager, what's your role? Is to mentor that person, right? So if you see that if it's going to help that person in the long run be what you want him to be, so you can be empathetic. Otherwise, you need to be tough in certain situations, right? Right? I think it's more about emotional intelligence. If you study the subject of emotional intelligence, so you'll understand when to. It's also about decision making. What's right in that moment. It all depends on the scenario, right? What's right in that moment, and I'm keeping the bigger goals in mind.
Empathy helps you put yourself into the other person's situation. That's all. But we still have a goal to accomplish.
I just have one line to add if that's going to clarify. When we say you have to be empathetic, it doesn't mean that we have to be sympathetic to the person, right? It's different. Empathy is being, Sridhar rightly mentioned, put yourself in the shoes of the other person, understand how he would react to what you would say or do, and then use that to validate your own actions. So it doesn't actually draw a judgment, but it gives you a tool to evaluate the situation and do the best that you can. Please.
I think as a manager, it is also equally important when you are empathetic or even sympathetic to do a fact validation first. So people come up with hundreds of problems every day. So as a manager, you cannot be empathetic and sympathetic with each person, depending on the seriousness of the situation and validation of the facts that or the points that the person has raised, and then you arrive at a certain decision, right? So that I think there is no simple, straightforward answer. Whether spectrum ka this side or spectrum ka that side, it has to be depending on situational. It's a judgment call.
I'll give another example. Let's say somebody lands in a situation where he has to be given the pink slip. Now, empathy helps you understand why your manager did that. Don't hold it against your manager. Right? He's done it because there was a compulsion from the organization. I have had such situations. But I'm the only leader who could stand up and say I have not sacked people unceremoniously. That's a record that I have maintained in my career. Right? But it amounts to understanding the situation where that pressure comes on a person to say that you are 28 people, you've got to bring it down to 14. That means 50% of the team has to go because 50% of the budget has been cut. Empathy allows you to understand the situation. But task orientation will make you accept it. If it were only empathy, you would disagree with the decision. But the task orientation as an employee, as a person at the receiving end, will help accept. So many a time, you may not agree with the decision, but you still have to accept. So empathy helps you understand the situation and identify yourself where you are and helps you disagree. But task orientation allows you to accept it and move on in your life because you're not going to set the clock back. It's done is done. So you got to move on. That is acceptance of the reality and moving on. That is task orientation.
Yeah, true to that. You had to do the task. You had to give a pink slip, right? But empathy is just going one step. Maybe you can refer that person elsewhere. See what you can do that
Exactly.
for that person.
Good point.
That is empathy, right? I
Good
mean,
point.
just going one point
Good
beyond.
point. Good point. The manager could still help refer the person to various people. Arya, do something for this guy. Good team member of mine, right? And even there, to your earlier question, I would refer. See, the problem is, it's the good guys who end up leaving. So I would refer the good guy or a deserving guy to somebody rather than a lesser performer, right? So show that empathy.
Empathy also is recognition that this could impact the other people in the organization and structure your process accordingly.
Exactly. Empathy brings the human element to work.
Right.
I strongly believe it is necessary.
That's the single strong line. So we couldn't have asked for more.
Excuse me.
More. Okay.
Let's talk about village crisis.
Sorry?
Village crisis. Like people tend to shut themselves at 35 or 40. So how do you,
Village
as a
crisis.
manager, counsel them?
Mid-career. Mid-age crisis.
Midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis.
Mid-career.
So mid-career crisis, I think
Career.
the window of midlife crisis is moving downwards in age, right? In baby boomers' age, it was about 45, 48, right? And there was a joke those days when I started my career. I was told that in the 7th year you buy your first house, right? By the 20th year you invest in your second house, and that means it's your retirement investment, because 15 years later when you retire, you start working at about say 23 or so. 20 years of experience and you're at about 43. You retire at 55, 58. Those days the line was shifting. So that means you end up in a situation where you're almost there, or your retirement benefits by way of PF, gratuity, etc. will help you settle that loan and you are settled for life. That's the sort of thing. And hence at that 43, 45, 48, they were in a situation of having to make a decision. Either invest in the second house, continue my loyalty, or I have to put it into my kids' education, or is the company that I'm working for going to continue? I don't know any other company, I don't know any other industry. That used to be the midlife crisis point. Now I think with a shrinking lifetime of companies, of jobs, of people, and the loss of interest with a lot of people, 35, 30, 33 becomes the first crisis. I wouldn't call it midlife though. There is an early life crisis as well. That's the time when a person has to make a decision. I believe in looking at it as maybe 2-3 different capsules. The first capsule is when you've finished your first phase and you're looking at, am I heading in the right direction and I want to move? That's a crisis point. Do I take a different function? Do I continue in the same function? Do I probably take a managerial job, or do I shift industry? I've had people from hotel management industry who moved to IT, and the person is now doing extremely well in a facilities management. So there's no one industry that he's been part of. So that's one phase. The second phase is when you're at about 43, 45. If you notice, many people who have worked and then become entrepreneurs, they've all done it at the age of 33 to 37. So I think that's the first crisis point. The second phase is when you're 45, 47, and to the point that was made earlier, will I get a job elsewhere? I passed through it sometime back. Right? Will I get a job elsewhere? At this age, will they absorb me? I can be a consultant to a startup, but I cannot be an employee at a startup. Right? So you got to contend with that reality, and that's the time you realize that you are not in jobs like what your parents were or your grandparents were, which gave you a steady after job income, be it a pension or be it a rent or something else that gave you a steady income post your retirement. What do I do in the next 10 years where I invest for myself and my wife? Because by then your kids are already getting to college, right? They're already 15, 16, 17, they're getting into college. What do I do in the next phase which invests for myself? That's the second crisis that hits a person. At all points of time, first thing is stay current and define your direction. Second is bring that much of economic security that is required at any point of time in today's world. People say ensure that you have a 6-month balance in your life, in your bank, or in liquid instruments, where you're able to survive the next 6 months till you get the next job. Suddenly one fine morning something happens, you at least have a 6-month cover. That's the second thing. Bring at least that much of economic security. Third one is, in the process of looking at what is needed for you for your career, be conscious that you're doing what is right for the next generation. That comes in at the time when you have your first crisis. That's the time the person probably has a first child, a toddler, What are you doing to invest for that person? So these are three things that you've got to. First is your current status. Keep yourself current on whatever you're working on. Second is about bringing that much of economic security. Third is what you're doing for the family. As long as you get this balance, the crisis will be blown far easier. Anything else? Yeah, he just wants to add a point.
See, as far as mid-career crisis is concerned, what I personally see is, as Sridhar said, stay relevant. You cannot close your eyes and oblivion to the fact that nothing is going to happen. Please be prepared for the worst, so the worst never happens. But do things the right way, prepare yourself, always have a strong network, not just inside the organization, outside the organization. Because it's what the network that is going to take you to the next level. Your college, your peers, your seniors, your colleagues, that is all, because many have got placed just because of network. So have a strong network in place. Again, it comes to relations, people relations. So that is something which you should have focus on. And also keep updating your industry, what is happening out in the industry. And this is something outside this discussion. When you lose a job, this would come to you in some point of time. I wish it doesn't come to any point of time to anybody. But at times, when you lose a job, please prepare an Excel sheet of all your clients, your customers, your vendors, your friends, your colleagues, your alumni, your superiors, and your bosses, your reportees. These are the people who are going to take you to the next opportunity.
Very good.
So just to sum up.
There was one other question.
Oh, one more?
Okay. That's why it's not too personal, but you spoke about clear differentiation between personal life and professional life, like do not open the laptop after Friday evening. Do you think that is something that every employee at every level should follow? Because we are seeing many people that put themselves into work too much that they harm their personal relationships or things like that. Is that something which would make me a good manager or a good, better professional, rather than just how much ever I work, that much I would be earning. Sir also said that learning only starts when you enter the company. This is just a preparing point for us. So, if I would, what would I be doing if I regret missing out on something on those 2 days? I just close the laptop or something. What would happen if like that?
To be frank, you do all this learning, whatever it is for your family. The first priority is your family. So focus, you have to ensure that you give time to your family, but you make them understand that there are critical scenarios, so please make them understand, yes, this is the scenario, please help. But work is important in life, but work is part of life, work is not life. Your family is priority and you have to spend time with your family.
So I went through this transition about 20 years back. Okay. Initially, I used to think that will I miss something, but the chances to miss something was far lesser those days because we were living in a lesser connected world. When I had my first son, that was the time I moved. I was working then in Delhi, and I'm a South Indian, so I had to come back to see my child and all that. Initially, even those days, I would grab that 1 hour of time to work. But over time, I realized that when my son first started walking, or when my son first ate something, I missed that part, and that I've lost forever, right? So in 2003, if I remember right, when we used to come down south, what I did was I used to carry my laptop bag with me. I would keep it in front of me and I would not touch it. It was the sternest test I put for myself. I'd keep it in front of me, will not open the laptop, right? That gave me and then when I went back, I would have some 180, 200, 300 kind of mails. I mean, it varied with the varied level of responsibility that I handled. But then I realized that there are small things which tend to get escalated just because they want an instant answer. And 7 out of 10 times, not all 10, 7 out of 10 times, the issue was that somebody was unprepared or somebody forgot to send that email to you or somebody was so engrossed in something else. So once I learned to separate that, even now, there are times when I have to work. Or for example, I've attended an event, for example, in Delhi, and I have to come back home. But Saturday morning I've got to be somewhere. I've taken a midnight flight. I am going to take one next Friday. I'm going to take a midnight flight to get back home. So it does hamper my personal time. But all I'm saying is, excuse me. So the point that you made about, am I going to miss something, or am I going to get more for what extent of work that I do? I don't think that's the right point. As a person, as a employee, you have a certain task to be accomplished within a certain point of time. So long as you are able to face yourself, face your conscience at the end of the day and tell yourself, I have earned my salary for the day, you don't have to fear anything. Not your bosses, not your parents, not your family. You're just answerable to your conscience. Tell yourself that you've earned your salary for the day, you've completed your task for the day. Supposing you were not able to do it for whatever reasons, there is no harm in using your personal time. Because you have used your official time or your official work purpose, you were not able to accomplish something, either just because you probably did not have the mood for it that day, you were not able to concentrate. And midnight after 11 o'clock, you're able to spend that 2 hours and concentrate on something in an undisturbed environment. Go ahead and do it. But it is entirely personal as to where you want to draw the line and how do you want to do it. But compulsively looking at an email over the weekend is not something that I would subscribe to. Compulsively wanting to bring yourself into office work. Let me ask you a question. We don't hesitate to work for 2 hours on a Saturday on a call. Yeah, एक call ले ले यार, please. That will be the request. That same liberty. Have anybody allowed you that time to say, on a working day at 11 o'clock, you go and stand in the queue to get your Aadhaar card registered or get your passport renewed? Do you or don't you feel guilty? So there is a book called The 7-Day Weekend. Please read the book. It will tell you how you've got to balance this, and it is entirely personal. Now, if I am working on a Saturday, I will not hesitate to go for standing in a queue at 11 o'clock in the morning. I would say I'm not available for the next 2 hours. But as long as I'm able to balance the time and the 2 hours worth that I'm making the company lose for my sake, I find either an alternate time or I overdo during some other time, you're above board. That is the balance that you've got to bring. That's what I meant by saying, see, this is, the weekend I don't touch my laptop is more of I would say, a figurative state. But what I accomplish otherwise is actually the material important state. And that is your responsibility to the organization. Right? So, ensure that you do what the organization expects you to do, but don't ever think putting excess hours. And there are a lot of people who, I can tell you examples. There are one set of people who, if the boss is in town, they'll be in office at 8:45 in the morning. And if the boss is sitting up to 8 o'clock in the night, they will sit up to 8 o'clock in the night because they want to be seen as working, which is one. Second is, there are many people whom I know, you won't even believe this, would ensure that they would send a mail at 11 o'clock in the night. Yeah, last night at 11 o'clock I sent you the mail, meaning, oh, I worked at 11 in the night and you did not respond to me. Don't get into all these compulsions. Don't get into all these pressures, because these are all acting. Some people are busy, some people are acting.
In fact, we can go against them, that they are not able to organize their time.
It could be. So some people are working hard, some people are hardly working. So differentiate the two and maintain your balance. All I'm saying is, you are your judge. And ultimately, I subscribe to the point what Vijay said completely. When you are there or not there, the company moves on. When you are there or not there, the only people who suffer are your family. So your first loyalty is to your family. Loyalty still exists today, but not in the context of the company, in the context of your family. Your first loyalty is to your family. Rest of it, throw loyalty out of the window. Throw it out of the window. This is my advice.
So if I may wind up, managing a multi-generation workforce is less of a challenge after listening to so many valuable insights and more of an excitement, I would think. And there are valuable lessons, I think, that we can take away from this session, and there are lessons across generations, because today's generation Z is going to be generation Y tomorrow, and then a generation X after. So I think there are valuable lessons that we have learned. One is respect for each other, I think is at the heart of any relationship. empathy for each other and empathy for the situation is very important. And the third point probably is learn to work in a collaborative way rather than as a command and follow principle.
And network.
And
Network.
networking. I think that was a very valuable input that Vijay had shared. Please.
Just curious. If this generation is Generation Z, what are we going to call the next generation? Anyway, somebody else's problem.
Maybe no, they'll find it. They'll find it.
Come back to A. Come back to A. Why did they start at X though?
The X Factor.
Yeah,
The X Factor.
The X Factor.
So thank you very much to all the panelists for sparing valuable time and sharing insights. It was very useful.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.